I feel like if you stay in that space and you ruminate in that, um, you can kind of get stuck in there, and it's a dark, heavy place. But also, it's a beautiful place because if you can allow yourself to feel the emotion that's coming up through that, the questioning, all of that, and you can just allow that and surrender to that, then you figure it out for yourself what your own truth is. And it doesn't matter then what the mind is trying to say to you about whether this is right or that's wrong or somebody said this. And it's what's true for you. What do you believe to be true?
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. Today, I am thrilled to welcome to the show Angela Clement. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Julie. So nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I am so excited to talk to you today. Your journey has been a really challenging one, but I think it's a very important, very important your story is. And so, before we get started, will you briefly introduce yourself, like who you are, where you live, anything you want to share with us to start?
Sure. Yeah. So I spent my life in education. I was a teacher, principal, and taught in a very small community called Val Marie in Saskatchewan. And my husband and I were married and lived just north of Val Marie, about 10 miles on a cattle ranch. And we raised two children, and it was amazing. It was a great place to raise your kids, really small community. I enjoyed my work at the school and totally loved living out at, on the ranch with the cattle. And we were poised to retire. He was going to, he actually sold the ranch, and I was just a couple of years probably away from retiring from education. And he just wasn't feeling good. It was Christmas of 2020, and he just wasn't feeling well. And so in January, he went to the doctor and was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer.
Wow.
And so that really was a shock, a real shock, as you can probably imagine. And just 10 months later, at the end of October, he passed away. So in that time, I had taken retirement. We moved to a new community in Maple Creek and bought a new house to be closer to a hospital. And my son lives here in Maple Creek. And so when the dust all settled and everything got quiet, I found myself in a totally different place. I wasn't living where I used to live. I wasn't working anymore. I didn't have a husband. I had no idea who I was or what I was doing or why I was even here. It was absolutely devastating, from just the change, but then also just the loss of my very best friend, that I spent 35 years with. So it was a tough time for me.
100%. That would be just so, devastating, absolutely devastating to lose your husband. That alone, but then having your life kind of upended with a move and being in a new community and no longer having like your professional associates and interactions and duties, and I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what did you do from there to begin coping with all of that?
Well, while he was sick, I really took an interest in energy healing. I had already had an interest in that, but when he got sick, I decided to get more serious about it because I thought that it would really help him. And it did. It really did. I took some courses and I practiced, and I used the energy healing for myself as well. And I had enlisted energy healers to work with him for the pain and to keep him comfortable. And that worked really well. So when he passed away, it just seemed natural that I would continue to pursue the energy healing. And so in January, I signed up for a class that was all different types of healing modalities. And at the same time, I had signed up for some grief coaching with somebody I know.
And that's when we met. Yes.
Yeah, because at that time, just a couple of months after my loss, I knew I wasn't getting better. It just wasn't, I was getting more confused about what this whole grief thing meant and where I was supposed to go and what I was supposed to do. And I remember this quote that was on Facebook that was just, some people say you will grieve for a lifetime. I choose otherwise. I choose the path from hurt to hope to healing every day. And that was your quote. And I saw that and I just knew that was the message I wanted it, because I kept getting the messages about, how you grieve for a lifetime and that, this will just be here and you will learn how to live with it and you will learn to carry it. And for me, that was devastating, because if I was going to continue to feel the way I was feeling, I simply did not want to live. That was just not in that was not in the plan. And
Very disempowering, isn't it?
yes, yes. Well, it gives you the sense that you're just going to have to live with the pain that you have, that you just have to get used to carrying it around. And there's this other association that it's almost noble to carry that pain because it's associated with the love of the person that you lost. And so, I don't know, it wasn't helpful for me in any way, shape, or form.
I love the
Yeah.
way you worded that it's almost noble to carry that pain. And that is really not, the idea, right? Like that's nobility is not carrying pain. It's
No.
it's actually noble to carry the love, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That actually gives me goosebumps when you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's all about the love. And so then, moving forward, I can see the divine plan that was in place, the fact that I was taken right out of my community and like had a completely fresh start all over. I think that was truly part of the plan. And it really was a catalyst in me getting help and seeking help and making sure that, I was searching for my truth. What is my truth about this grief and this loss? What do I believe about it? Because I don't like what other people are, the messages that I'm getting.
Yeah, you don't like some of the alternatives that you're hearing.
Yeah,
That makes so
exactly.
much sense. I want to go back a little bit because you said that you had been introduced to energy healing before this diagnosis, your husband's diagnosis. And what was that introduction like? Like, how did that come about? What did that look like? What did that feel like to you?
Yeah, so my son, as a baby, had a condition called Hirschsprung's disease, which is a bowel disease. And he was really sick. And as a new mom, it was very concerning for me because we had done surgery, we had done all kinds of medical interventions as far as food goes, but he still, at 4 years old, was not able to pass his stool properly. And he was really, well, it was I felt like he wasn't going to be able to start school because there was no way we could potty train him in the way things were going. And a friend of mine just said to me, you know, there's this healer, and she lived about 3.5 hours from us. And she said, you know, she helped me with my daughter. Maybe she could help you with your son. And so I made Blaine drive us up there. And it was like kicking and screaming. He was so, we're going to see a witch. We're going to see a witch. I remember him saying that.
And Blaine was
And
your husband. Yes. Yeah.
yes,
I don't think
Blaine
we
was my
mentioned
husband.
you
Yeah.
were.
And so when we got there, he opened up the door and she said to him, by the way, I'm not a witch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she had a lot of psychic ability as well. And so when we worked with her, we just noticed Curtis just got better and better. This is my son. So we just, I mean, it started to make me wonder, what is this energy healing and how does this work? You know, and can I do this? You know, so and you would never know now that my son had any issues since then. So it really was truly a miracle in my mind that he was healed. And so then, yeah, I did take an afternoon with her and she showed me what she knows. And I just naturally and intuitively used that and practiced pretty much all the 30 years that, you know, I had Curtis, with family, with friends, sometimes with him. I would do little sessions with him. And I always found, you know, people found a peace or a love, or, you know, they would feel warm or they would feel happier or whatever. And I never felt like, you know, I had done any big healing or, you know, transformation of any type, but I always knew that there was something to it.
Yeah.
I never pursued it anymore because I was so busy with what I was doing, you know, as far as education. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So take us back then to, you know, when you began, because I know when we started working together that you were doing a lot of seeking and you were seeing a lot of people. I
yes.
always think of you, Angela, because you were like you're the educator and you're like the model student and you wanted to do everything, and it was almost like I had to go, let's put the brakes on, let's slow everything down a little bit. You know, we don't have to get over this in a month, we don't have to get over
Yeah.
this in a, you know, and it was so early. I mean, let's just, you know, let's just acknowledge that Blaine passed away in October, and in January you were doing this grief work with me, and you were taking these classes, right, for energy
Mhm.
healing and so forth. So that is a very, very short timeline right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I was very driven, you know, like you say, to just figure this out. Like, what is this? What is this process of grief? What is happening to me? What can I do to help myself? And, you know, I feel like that too was a very spiritual, uh, you know, it was driven from my higher self. I don't think that, you know, that was all my human self doing that at all. It was very much guided and it felt really urgent to me.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So what did you begin to discover? What were some of the things that happened um in your journey of your training and your experiences with I remember at one point you had gone to Sedona. You traveled all over
Yes.
seeking comfort and support and understanding and education.
Yeah, it just seemed like I was led to a lot of really amazing people healers, experts in grief, just they would pop up on my Facebook feed, or they would be in my email, or they would be, I would just see. And I was searching too, I was seeking out these things. And when I saw that there was this retreat in Sedona, and my aunt and uncle were there down in Mesa, and they said, well, we'll take you. I thought, well, you know what? What have I got to lose? I'll go down there and try that out. And I remember getting on the plane. It was like the first time I'd gone anywhere without Blaine, and how sad I was. But at the same time, I was so excited about just finding out more. And that experience, the 5 days in Sedona, I did so many healing modalities. There was sound healing, there was shamanic work, there was breath work. There was so much that happened in that week. And it felt like through that process, I was getting more and more answers about who I was and what this truth about spirituality was. And it was just really a springboard for me to keep searching, keep examining, keep exploring. And I would say the biggest thing I got out of that was, I remember the breathwork session I had done in the evening, and it had taken me to my knees. Mm-hmm. There was so much grief and sadness coming up, and I really had no idea how I was going to deal with it all. It was so heavy. And the next morning I had this session booked with a shaman magically, it was just the perfect timing. And I remember him just saying to me, because I was saying, I lost my best friend, I don't have a best friend. And he said to me, yes, you do. Your best friend is in you. That goddess inside of you is your best friend. And he said, let me help you. I'll introduce you to her. And so we had gone down by the lake, and he played his, he was drumming and I was meditating, and I could just feel it. And so, yeah, it was that connection with myself, I think, that really helped me with my loss.
Yeah, beautiful. Are there other memories like that where you can identify certain things that happened, certain experiences that you had that you just felt like divinely led, like you said, or like your higher self was there leading you along?
Oh, absolutely. Like always. That whole class that I took, the energy healing course, I worked with a lady named Adrienne Blackwell, and she did some ancestral healing. And I remember at one point I was having a lot of stomach issues, and a lot of them, I think, were related to the grief and all the emotion, but also there was some ancestral healing that needed to be done. And it's kind of a long story, but basically I had two different ancestral lines that were not agreeing with each other. And in the end, I ended up going into a meditation and doing a whole process at my altar that I had no idea what I was doing. I was just guided to do. And I remember the two tribes, in my mind shaking hands. And it was just like this huge experience that I don't know if I'll ever experience that ever again. Like, it was so amazing. And then the symptoms lifted. And so I really think that, there was a lot to that. And I've never experienced anything like that again. So, it's like, yeah. But those kind of things. And also with the summit, I was guided by her to do this summit, and just stepping into this space where I'm asking people I didn't know to come and speak on a summit that I had never done before. Yeah. But all the people that came in at the perfect time. And they gave me the information and the messages I needed at that time. And one of the healers that I had worked with that was in mediumship. She'd been talking to Blaine, and she could actually give me the names of the people who were going to be in my summit, which hadn't run yet. And she told me, Blaine has organized this for you in the order it needs to be done so that it can help you through this process. And I truly believe that. I believe that is true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you now, your relationship with Blaine, with him on the other side, you hear, um, if you're comfortable talking about that, like,
Yeah.
what is that experience like?
Yeah. If I, excuse me, if I reach out to him, ask him questions, I have a knowing, just a knowing that he's there. And sometimes I will hear, and it's not the same kind of hearing. It's like I can hear his voice, and it's just letting me know that he's there. And he sometimes does give me words of wisdom, and not always. Sometimes I feel like I have to figure things out on my own, and so I don't get that guidance all the time. But he does send me a lot of signs, and the doves I was just talking about with you are one of those. And I get that often, especially when I'm doing something like this, or I'm writing in my journal, or something where I'm meditating or in a special place at a special time. I will get all kinds of doves singing. So it is pretty amazing, the relationship that we have now.
Yeah. Well, and just so everyone who's listening understands what you're talking about, when we got on this call, you share what you told me about the doves.
Yeah. So they were singing outside the window while I was sitting and waiting to meet with you. And I really don't think I've heard them sing like that since I was working with you.
Wow.
And I just felt like this whole experience has come full circle. Coming back and meeting with you and doing this podcast just feels like I'm on the other side of that. I've gone through this cycle of grief and loss, and not to say that I won't have moments of sadness in the future. For sure, that's going to happen, but and certainly grief goes on because we're always losing something. Something's always changing. We're always going through this process. And I talk about that in my book. But it just feels like I'm in such a beautiful place with where Blaine is, where I am in life, and just the understanding that I'm here to continue to do this work. He's here to help and guide me through it. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to other people who have lost a loved one, who are maybe earlier in the process and are feeling confused or not sure what to do, and they hear these stories about connecting with their loved ones and they're just not sure, they're not sure where to start? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I wanted really badly to connect with Blaine too. And I think a lot of people do. And opening myself up to just recognizing those signs that he sent. And really, what I did was I would write in my journal and I would ask him questions. And I would find in different ways that those questions would be answered, maybe through another person, or like through the internet, or a book that I pick up or something. I always got the answers somehow to those questions. And I know that everyone can do this. And I know that sometimes it's really frustrating because you want that connection and that answer like right now. And sometimes we have to wait a bit. But it will come. And it's just opening yourself up to that and letting yourself accept it, because sometimes we'll get messages and then we will write them off. Our mind will say, no, that wasn't really a message, or that wasn't really, but I believe that feeling you get when you see the message and go, oh, that might be a message. It is.
Yeah. I love that so much because even asking that question, is this a message? Is like, it's almost like we're being given the message that this is a message, and then our brain is answering, is this a message? Because we're
Yeah.
hearing internally somehow in this space where we're not even acknowledging it. And so when we ask that question, it's like, yeah, just always answer that question with a yes.
Mhm.
Unless it's harming you or someone else, if it's a positive um, answer, if it's a positive message, then absolutely grab a hold of that and continue to
Yeah.
build from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is a special kind of feeling that comes with it. And it's almost like maybe a little bit of surprise, a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of excitement. It's kind of like this feeling that comes with that. It's not like you say, it's not a negative thing in any way, shape, or form. It's always very happy, light, exciting, that feeling that comes over you when you see or feel that message coming in. So it's just to be aware of that, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, it's an uplift. It's a
Hmm. Yeah.
I love the way you're that that breath in, that uplift, that yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful. What were some of the things early on? I would love to like talk about kind of maybe how your spiritual practices have changed over time, or if they have. Like what were some of the things that were supportive to you early in this process, and um how has that continued or changed or yeah.
Yeah. Well, the writing was huge for me. Sitting and writing, and like I said, I would ask questions, and sometimes I would be able to channel answers through that writing, right? So I would just write out the questions and then start writing the answer and just allowing it to come through me. And then sometimes I would read back that answer and go, wow, did I really write that? So I know that, those messages come through. And so I'm still writing. I'm still writing. I journal every single day, and that's never changed. And that was a lot of the reason why the book came out, was because of all the writing that I was doing. And but some of the things that I did were like sitting in front of an altar. I like to put mementos of my grandmother and my aunts and Blaine, and I would sit in front of the altar and just breathe, meditate. Sometimes I would have questions. Sometimes I would have food. It was like just being in that space, and kind of almost, it was almost like, because I sat there, I was calling them in.
Mm,
And then that was the place where I would get answers, or at least start the ball rolling to get them to help me with some things. And sometimes I would just drop things that I had no control of there on that altar. I mean, there's sometimes you can't do anything about where you are or what's happening, and it's too much to carry, and I would just drop it for them.
mhm.
And so I still go there once in a while, but not as much as I used to.
Yeah. For those that aren't familiar with this idea of an altar, will you share a little more about what that looks like, or how you put that together, or what that
Yeah,
is even? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it can be anything, anywhere. So it could be out in your garden, it could be in your house. Mine is just actually in the corner of my den. I have a shelf there, and I just put some things that remind me of the people who of my ancestors, right? And so I have a little mouse for my grandmother. It was a little ornament that she had. I have some purple there because my aunt reminds me of purple. And I have pictures of Blaine. And sometimes when I go walking out in nature, I'll bring back a pine cone or a leaf or a rock or something, crystals, something that means something to me, feathers, and I'll put them on the altar. And sometimes I'll put water there because they suggest that sometimes that's a good thing to put energetically. And sometimes I will light a candle, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have incense. It's really whatever feels good to you. And it's just having a space, even sitting in beside a beautiful plant or some flowers lightens up that space and kind of gives you that higher energy that so that you can connect. And so, yeah, it's just, and this is something that I teach actually, is how to do an altar and go into that a little bit more about what you can do with that. Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's wonderful because one of the things I love about your approach and the way you're explaining this is it has this element of there's no right or wrong. It's
Right.
just what feels correct for you and finding those things that feel correct for you and yeah, there's no like, oh, it has to be this way or that way.
No.
I love that so much. That's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. What else has kind of like early on, you talked about sitting at that altar more often. What are some of the things that you do now to, well, let me back up a little bit because I think one of the things that we're challenged with when we, especially, and it's so interesting to me, and maybe it's because of my background in grief, but so interesting to me that so many of the people that I have on this show are people who have experienced really painful losses with loved ones that have crossed over on the other side. And I feel like this gives us a connection to the other side that we didn't have before, or it changes our relationship with the other side of the veil or the other side of what we the spirit realm versus the physical realm. One of the challenges living here in the physical realm is that sometimes we lose touch with the spiritual realm, or we start to doubt that connection, or we start to feel like maybe this isn't real, maybe I'm just fooling myself. How if you've ever had those feelings or you've worked with people who have, what are some of the ways that you have helped to overcome that experience?
Yeah, well, I just remember Mother's Day. Mother's Day was awful. And the reason why I say it was awful was because that was when I was asking all those existential questions like, why am I here? Why did my husband leave? What am I supposed to be doing? Is any of this really real? Is there a God? All of those big questions. And I think a lot of people who go through grief actually do end up in that space and they end up asking those questions. And I think we all find out what's true for us through that process. But going through it is difficult. And I reached out a lot to energy healers, to my coach, to people, because I feel like if you stay in that space and you ruminate in that, you can kind of get stuck in there, and it's a dark, heavy place. But also, it's a beautiful place because if you can allow yourself to feel the emotion that's coming up through that, the questioning, all of that, and you can just allow that and surrender to that, then you figure it out for yourself what your own truth is. And it doesn't matter then what the mind is trying to say to you about whether this is right or that's wrong, or somebody said this. And it's what's true for you. What do you believe to be true? And it's I feel like all the things that I used to help me on other moments of intense emotion, I used through that probably times 10. Because it was like, waking up in the morning and just having this really heavy, I don't know what I'm doing, or the sadness was clouding everything that I did, even things that used to be happy. It was just taking all the corners and the sides off of everything. And I actually questioned whether I would ever feel true joy again, because I felt like, maybe this sadness would just cloud it forever. So it's help getting someone to kind of help walk you through that. I mean, certainly you have to do some work of sitting with it and allowing it, but learning the tools of how to do that, I think it's important to have somebody help you with that.
Yeah. I'm curious, like before you took your son this, years ago to this energy healer, did you have like a background in like a church or a belief in God or something like that, or belief in energy? Was there some foundation for some of this before you went into this space?
Oh yeah, I went to Sunday school. We were Protestant, was United Church, and I was brought up to believe that if you were good, God would be good, right? And if you weren't, then somehow you may be punished at some point, and so there was always this anxiety about doing something wrong,
Mm,
that kind of seeped in. And I was always worried about disappointing God, right? And I wondered, how can he forgive me if I do something wrong? Right? Like there was
mhm.
all of this. And when I started to do more exploration around my own spirituality, I started to realize that that's really not what God is to me. God is more um, like someone who walks with you, really is inside of you, that is this beautiful love and compassion and kindness that helps you through all of those times when you're criticizing yourself, you're judging yourself. It's like, always, if I reach out to that source, I'm always being comforted in whatever is bothering me. It's always a compassionate arm around you. It's okay. We're going to be all right. We just have to get, this is what you need, kind of thing. Feel into it. Yeah. So it really changed my whole perspective on what God is. And I think that, it was just my own interpretation, probably. I think a lot of us read the Bible and interpret it in a certain way, or we have sermons and we interpret those in a certain way. And then we take that with us. And I really had to take some time and redefine what it was for me and what felt good for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you keep coming back to this idea of like what it is for me, which I just love because it really is, because we can find hundreds of opinions around us. Every person that we talk to is going to give us a different explanation of God, of spirituality, of everything. That there's
Right.
just an opinion. Every person is going to have their own opinion about different things. But it really is when you create that relationship yourself, where you identify like, what do I feel? How am I comforted? Where am I feeling this peace? What is this experience like for me? What is my relationship with God, with the other side, with all of that? And really allowing yourself, because that takes a lot of allowing to say, I don't need somebody outside of me to tell me who God is when I have that connection. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. And there was lots of times where I would meet people and they would say things and I'd be like, "Oh, that's it. That's it.
Mm.
That's the path." And then I would follow that and I'd be like, "Oh, not quite." And then you'd follow somebody else and be like, "Oh, that's it." And I did that for a long time. Just thinking, okay, that's the answer. That's the answer. That's the answer. And then I finally had to say, no, actually, certainly lots of those things resonated with me, and I would take bits and pieces of what I was learning and adopt it as my own because it felt true to me. But there was no one way or one certain, person that just had all the answers.
Embodied it all, right? Yeah.
No, no.
And that's what I love about doing these interviews is because my hope is that as you're listening, that you're hearing, you're hearing Angela, you're hearing me, you're hearing other guests speak about their own experiences, and that same thing happens, right? Like certain things resonate, certain things don't. And so we just, rather than like fight against the things that don't resonate, we just take what does, and we go on to the next level of our understanding, the next level of our experience. Because in my personal view, God is so big and so incomprehensible from our human perspective that I don't know that we ever come to a full understanding here. I
Mhm.
don't know if that happens, but we can have that personal experience that informs us. And I just love the way that you have owned your own journey and owned your own experiences and like, oh, this resonates. And that, have you found, I'm curious about this because I have found that there's been some things where when I first heard it, it didn't resonate with me. And I was like, okay, that doesn't resonate, but I like this part. And then later on, I was like, oh, now I understand that other part that didn't resonate before, but now I'm like, oh, I see where that fits now. Have you had that experience as well?
Oh, yes. Lots of times I'd interview people and, they would say things and I'd be like, ooh, I don't know if I should share that. I don't know if I agree with that, right?
I definitely have had that experience too. 100%.
And then, the whole idea of the podcast is to share different views and viewpoints. And so, like, you kind of gotta leave most of that in there. But later on, yeah, you do sometimes discover that that is truth. And sometimes people say things and you adopt it, and then you realize later, no, actually, that's not, you know. And so it's always evolving, what that truth is for you. But I know that when it feels good inside to me, then I just know that it's right. And when it doesn't, just because somebody is in a place of expertise, I often would put healers on a pedestal because it's like, whoa, they can do this. They're so connected and they must know, right? And
Hmm.
then there would be things that they would say that wouldn't resonate with me, and then I'd be so confused. And then I would start to judge myself. Well, how come I don't feel that way? And I've gotten better at discerning what is true for me and what isn't in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, and as an educator, you are an expert in this whole idea of development. And so our spiritual development isn't much different than our physical or our emotional or our mental development, our intellectual, I should say, development. Our spiritual development isn't much different. And so definitely we're going to at a preschool level, we're going to understand things differently than we are at a grade school level, than a high school level, than, so forth. So secondary education versus primary education and so forth. And so, yeah, we're all on this journey and we're all in different places. But what I love is that we can learn so much from each other. I often think about that parable of the blind men who come up to the elephant, and one feels the leg and says, "Oh, it's a tree," because they're like,
Yeah.
or they feel the tail and it's like, "Oh, an elephant is a rope," and so each of them 10 different experiences with one elephant and having these different experiences. And so that's why we can learn so much from each other, is because when we share, all of a sudden I'm over here with the leg and somebody else is describing the tail, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's something to see over there too. Maybe there's a part of that that helps my journey as well. So I think about that a lot. I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
know which parts I'm feeling right here, but I know I'm not understanding the whole picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I like how you talk about, spirituality and growing through it because yeah, I believe that too. It's really a practice just like everything else. It's a lot of learning, which is kind of the fun part, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And we we have a shared passion of learning for sure. What are some of the things that you do today to help you what are some of your spiritual practices that help you feel stay connected?
I still do Donna Eden's energy routine. I always fall back on that, her daily energy routine. Every time I feel like my energy is a little off, I just go back to that. It just seems to reground me somehow. I often still write. I'll write out what doesn't feel right. Why is this, kind of off? And it's funny, sometimes I know exactly what's causing it, and sometimes I have no idea why I'm feeling a little misaligned, not the things aren't quite right. And I don't know if it's, like a collective energy that's coming in, or it's like I have no idea where it's coming from sometimes. But I can work through it through the writing, through doing that daily energy routine and doing some clearing. I like to do like a little prayer and just like clear energy if I can. And so those are regular things that I keep doing. And I also have positive affirmations that I will repeat over and over and over and over if I start to get negative. Um, that seems to put a cog in this the wheel that's spinning for me. But you pick up tools, and sometimes intuitively I will just pick up my drum and start drumming, or I'll go outside and hug a tree. Like it just depends on what I think I need at that moment, and I will keep trying things until I can lift it. And sometimes it just requires me to sit with it, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have to normalize the fact that we're not always going to feel 100%. We're not always going to be
No.
excited about life and thrilled about what's happening, or that there's going to be the ups and downs as part of our humanity for sure. I just love all that you've shared. You've shared so much wisdom with us today. Is there something else that you would like to share before we talk about where people can reach you, talk about your book?
Well, I just always, because my whole mission is for people to understand that, even though grief is really hard, it's probably one of the hardest things that you can go through, especially when you've lost, a child, a spouse, somebody really close to you, a really close pet. It's so difficult and challenging, and the emotions that are coming up are so hard. I just don't want people to think that that is the way it's going to be forever, and that you can't, I want people to know that you can get back to joy, and that you can get back to that fulfilling life again. And there may be a certain amount of time, that it will take for you to get there, but you can get there. And not to think that you have to succumb to, the sadness and that despair that comes with it.
Yeah, that's kind of full circle too, because at the beginning you were talking about how you saw this quote about like, we don't have to stay in grief forever, that there is hope for healing and so forth. And so that's beautiful that now you are the messenger sharing that message. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your book and where people can find you and all the good stuff.
Yeah. So everything is on healingenergy.world. That is my website, and you can find the links to buy my book there. It's also on Amazon. And I have a support group that you can sign up for. It's free. I hold it every 10 days. It's an amazing group. We talk about grief for sure, but we also talk about the afterlife and spiritual things. And everybody comes in sharing different resources and things that they've been using. And so it's really valuable. I also keep notes for that, and I put them online. And so you can access those at any time. You can see the resources that we've been talking about and sharing. That's on my website. And I also have some meditations on there, and my podcast. I have the links to the podcast, and you can go and check that out. And you can contact me. I do healing sessions. I do angel readings. A partner and I have started to do a really powerful work. He is a channeler and a medium. And so he does the messages from your loved one, and I do the unique healing that goes with that. And we've found this to be, one of those really powerful sessions that I think are going to make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, because it's a full package.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah.
It is so fun to connect with you today. Like you mentioned, we met, what's it been, a little over 4 years ago, and began working together, and just watching you through that process learn and grow and experience. And um, you're just an amazing person, and all the work that you've done since. And I just have to say, when you were writing your book, you reached out and asked if I would be willing to write the what do we call it, prelude, or the
Forward.
intro,
Yeah.
forward. Yeah, I'm like trying to think what's the word. And I had the most amazing experience writing that, because when you reached out, I was like, well, no time like the present. And I sat down, and it literally felt like a channeled message to me. It was like, it just flowed. It just like, and it just spoke to me of the power of your book and your experiences and the wisdom that you share. And I was so inspired by that the forward that I wrote, and I have your book, and everyone, and I've read it, and I look at that forward, and I'm like, I didn't write that. I don't. That was my higher self. That was the angels. That was, Blaine sitting back here going, okay, write a good one for Angela, helping me along,
And I
because it's
remember reading that forward and just crying, because it just really summed up the book so well, and you really hit all the key pieces that I was trying to get across through the book. So, and rightfully so, because you had a big part in my healing journey, and so I'm still so grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you. You're just really, I just have so much admiration for you, and I appreciate you being on the show today. And remind us what the name of your podcast is. I don't know if you mentioned it.
It's Awaken Your Soul's Journey,
Okay.
Embracing Grief as a Pathway to Transformation. But if
Okay.
you look up Angela Clement and Awaken Your Soul's Journey, you'll find it. It's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's on podcast apps?
Yeah,
Then?
all the podcast platforms, and also on YouTube as well.
Okay. Fabulous. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Angela. It's been a treat. 100%.
Yeah, thank you.